I was watching another Toothpick, and at the beginning of the episode, everybody's coming out of the church where some relative of Carmela's has been eulogized. We don't know this person, but I guess they're basically there for plot purposes and foreshadowing because they have cancer. And the title, Another Toothpick, refers to something that Livia and Janice would say that was meanness about somebody that had cancer who had lost weight. And do you know, I had cancer and I lost about 30 pounds in 3 months. And people will come up to you and say how good you look and that they wish they could lose some weight. And you're literally trying not to die. But that's beside the point. AJ, something has bothered me about AJ. I noticed it in episode 1 of season 2, but it goes back to season 1. And AJ is not a character in the early seasons as much as he is a plot device. And I was looking online to see what is that type of person called. And it's one thing that comes up as MacGuffin, but I think that's more of an object, like the suitcase in Pulp Fiction, or the Holy Grail, in the search for the Holy Grail, when there's something that drives the action that isn't really central to the story. But what I like best when it comes to a term for what I believe that AJ is called the fifth business. He's in the business of giving you the business of moving the plot along. The Fifth Business was a novel in the 70s about a guy who felt like he was a side character in his own life. So there's a literary and dramatic term for you, the fifth business. Now, AJ, he's the one who told Livia that Tony was going to therapy, and that started the whole plot where Junior and Livia were going to kill Tony. And he also, in season 2, episode 1, he was doing a report on DNA in school, and he went to visit his grandmother. This is when they were estranged from her, but the children still wanted to see her. And he had heard Janice and Tony talking about getting a DNR for Livia, and he brings that up in terms of that he thought it was a DNA, but they were saying DNR. So that lets her know that they are plotting her demise in turn. But in this episode, Another Toothpick, it's not exactly that he moves the plot along. It's more that he does some foreshadowing to a later scene, and this may all be in my mind, but to avoid spoiling. If I know you, you're doing that thing. Every day you're doing that thing, and I can't take you doing that thing you do. Okay, so in this episode, the A story is that Burt Young has come into town to hit a guy who put somebody else in a coma with a golf club over jealousy over that girl from Death Proof. That's my second Tarantino reference. I try to make 0 Tarantino references, but there's 2. And Burt Young is his godfather. He's literally his godfather. He's got to take this kid out now. That's the A story. But the B story is that Junior has cancer. And we know that Burt Young's character has cancer because he's coughing up a lung. Literally. Like pieces, blood, and things are coming out. He's coughing so much. And there's a point at the beginning during the funeral when after the funeral, they're on the steps, and AJ mentions acquaintance of his had a relative who had their head cut off and frozen until they could find a cure for cancer. And I thought that Junior snapped at him at that point, but eventually Junior kind of snaps at Janice for repeating the toothpick line. But later in the episode, Junior is upset because Tony has had, I'll call him is Bacala Sr. Burt Young's character is Bobby Bacala's father, has come into town to take out this kid who he's literally the godfather for, even though he's not a godfather in the sense, in the cinematic sense. That can't be an accident that they wrote that in. And Junior's upset that Tony has employed this dying man to do this job. And Junior gets upset and he calls on St. Denis. Well, St. Denis, now, see, I have to keep looking up these saints because I'm a Methodist. I don't know anything about saints, but I am very interested in them, and I'll let you know why maybe at the end of this. St. Denis actually was decapitated. So there's AJ talking about someone being decapitated as a way to save their head for when cancer is cured. Then Junior calls on St. Denis, and then interestingly, Junior has recurring trouble with his garbage disposal. Oh, and don't get me started on garbage. That would send me off on another path. But he goes over, and it's not working. Again, he reaches down in it. He finds this red clump, which is very tumor-like, because then the next thing is Bacala Sr. walks into the room and starts coughing up blood. And how this all comes out is that Junior has cancer, and that's the big reveal of this episode. And then, of course, that makes for all sorts of shenanigans with the hospital and the doctor in the next episode. But here's AJ mentioning a decapitation, and then Junior calling on the mercy of a saint who was decapitated. You know, most people don't know that. You can't get around how fascinating, compelling this show is. I'd like to get off of talking about it and move on to something else. But I like it in a sort of train wreck fascination way. It's the soap opera aspect that appeals to me. And, you know, Tony, he's no Victor Newman. He's no JR, but he's a pretty good soap opera villain. But the thing that drives me crazy and keeps me watching, and every time you watch something over and over, that is a drama. I think we all have this part in us that hopes for something to end better. And Tony sometimes is so close to getting it. He's so close to being a human being with compassion. The C story in this episode is that he gets a ticket after leaving a meeting, a session with him and Carmela and Dr. Melfi, and he's angry and he gets a speeding ticket, but he's unable to bribe the cop. And then later he goes to Fountains of Wayne, which, as you'll know, the lead singer sang or wrote the That Thing You Do, and may have sung it. He goes to the establishment called Fountains of Wayne, and there's the cop working there because Tony has called his councilman and had the guy busted to where he's not on the road anymore. And Tony feels bad about it, and he calls up the councilman and it's like, can't we do something about this? I just wanted the ticket to go away. And he tries to go back to the Fountains of Wayne and give the guy some money to make up for that he's not getting paid as well anymore. But in the end, as he always does, he says, fuck it, and goes back to being a tumor in the garbage disposal. You know, I don't remember what personal story that I was going to go back to that I mentioned earlier. Well, when I was first diagnosed, this is what it was. When I was first diagnosed with cancer, I had a child who was still in school, and I am divorced, and his father has never been very helpful with some neurological problems that our child has, and didn't always want to get him the therapy that he needed. And I was thinking of anyone to pray to just to live, to raise this child. And I found online, I was desperate. I'd had something like 13 doctor's appointments in 12 days at this point, and the port hadn't even gone in. And I was praying because I had found online that you can pray to Saint Raphael when you are ill, and that when you will know your prayer is answered if you see a shower of green sparks. And I was just praying to live to raise this child so that his father didn't get him and neglect him and not get him through high school. And I went shopping the next day. I had an MRI, and then I had chosen to have it in a nice little beach town near me instead of in the city. And so I went to one of my favorite consignment shops, and I walked in the door, and I saw a shower of green sparks. And I thought, oh, St. Raphael. But no, it was a green disco ball that they had for sale there, because you don't need proof that your prayers are being answered. Of course, mine was, and I'm here, and I am alive, and my son is in his 20s now, so we did all right. I'm thinking about moving out of talking about TV shows in the new year and trying to also cut down on my streaming services. And the budget plan I have is in order to save up my own money, not take any from my husband or from money I get from taxes or birthday money, which is coming up next week, or anything like that. I want to save up my own money from my little part-time business that I have and buy myself a Switch 2 by May. So I've got to cut down on some of these streaming services, but I can't cut out PBS because it's a charity. And I'm going to focus on some things that are on PBS, maybe some documentaries that I'd like to tell you about, but leaning heavily into Tubi, into Paramount Plus, which we get for free. So I said no shows, but maybe we can talk about Star Trek a little bit, and the free library app. So hoping you'll all have a good night tonight. If you're hearing this later, I hope you had a good New Year's Eve, and that you don't live out in the country where your neighbors like to shoot shotguns all night. And have a good rest of your holiday season. Bye.